All right, today we're going to break down everything you really need to know about the Nipah virus. Look, this is a public health issue that keeps popping up, so understanding it, that's your first line of defense.
Okay, let's just jump right in with the one fact that tells you everything you need to know about how serious this is. In some outbreaks, the Nipah virus has a fatality rate of up to 70%. Yeah, you heard that right, 70%. That number alone, it's why we have to pay very close attention.
So what is this thing? What are we actually talking about when we say Nipah virus?
Well, at its core, Nipah is what's called a zoonotic virus. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying it's a virus that jumps from animals to people. But here's the really crucial part. It doesn't stop there. Once a person is infected, it can then spread to other people.
Okay, so how does this thing get around? If you want to stop something, you've got to understand how it moves, right? It's all about tracing its journey.
You know, the original source in nature, its home base, is the fruit bat. And these bats are pretty clever carriers. They often have the virus without even getting sick themselves. So how does it get to us? Well, it's usually indirect. Think about things like contaminated food, maybe some raw date palm sap, or even a piece of fruit that a bat has had a nibble on. And in some of the older outbreaks, infected pigs were also part of that chain.
And this is where it gets really tricky. Once a person is infected, the virus can spread directly to other people. We're talking about close contact here, through respiratory droplets, from a cough or a sneeze or contact with body fluids. This is exactly what makes it so incredibly difficult to contain, especially in tight-knit communities, families, and of course, in hospitals.
Okay, so let's say someone is exposed. What does that actually look like? What are the signs you should be watching for? Because catching it early is everything. Well, first off, it doesn't happen right away. There's what's called an incubation period. So after someone is exposed, it usually takes anywhere from 4 to 14 days for symptoms to even show up. And you can see the problem, right? That delay makes it super hard to trace where the infection came from, and it means people could be spreading it without even knowing they're sick.
When it starts, it can be really deceptive. The illness often kicks off with symptoms you might just brush off as the flu. A fever, a bad headache, maybe a cough. But, and this is the scary part, it can escalate and fast. We're talking about a severe condition called encephalitis. That's a swelling of the brain, which can then lead to seizures and even a coma.
This isn't some brand new threat that just appeared out of nowhere, especially not in India, which has unfortunately had to deal with several really challenging outbreaks over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, if you look at the history, you can see a clear pattern. Outbreaks keep recurring, mostly in West Bengal, and then, more recently, several really serious ones in Kerala. And why there? Well, it's likely a mix of things. High population density, and also changes in the environment that bring bats, farm animals, and people into closer contact. This whole history gives us some really important clues for how to respond next time.
Okay, so we know the history, we know the symptoms, that's all great information. But the big question is, what can you actually do to stay safe?
All right, prevention really boils down to a few straightforward, common sense steps. It's all about breaking the chain of transmission. First, food safety is huge. Avoid things like raw date palm sap, and don't eat any fruit that looks like an animal has already had a bite. Second, stay away from any sick animals. And finally, and this is so important, if you're caring for someone who's infected, you have to use incredibly strict hygiene and protective gear.
And this right here is exactly why all that prevention stuff is so critical. Right now, there is no specific treatment or vaccine for Nipah. None. The only thing doctors can do is provide what's called supportive care, basically managing the symptoms and helping the body fight like heck. So for now, the absolute best defense is just not getting infected in the first place. So let's put it all together. If you or anyone you know starts experiencing a combination of a high fever and a really severe headache, or shows any neurological signs like confusion, you need to get medical help immediately. And that goes double if there's even a small chance you've been in contact with someone who might have it or with bats.
Look, getting a handle on the Nipah virus helps us deal with this specific threat, for sure. But it also kind of forces us to zoom out and ask a much bigger question, doesn't it? As our world keeps changing and the lines between human and wildlife spaces get blurrier, how do we get ready for the next zoonotic threat? Because it's not a question of if, but when.